Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Spare Room Podcast. My name is Brian Bauer. I'm going to be your host this evening. This is the spot where we're going to talk about all things addiction, recovery, personal development, worldview, current events, all to inspire purpose through hope, which means hearing other people's experiences. That means that sometimes you get to hear some of my personal lived experience in my recovery journey, as well as sometimes you get to hear from our guests and their personal experience and their recovery journeys as well. Some of the knowledge and wisdom that they've been able to drop on us, all with the ultimate goal of making each other better. That's why we're here, making each other better, making our communities better, and thus making the world a little bit better place just by doing our part. So with that said, the topic that I have for you guys this evening is on the idea of working in the addiction treatment industry in this field. And this came to me, this shows up on my radar from time to time. Sometimes it's more in your face than others. And the thought today is that, really this industry, to be perfectly clear, is not for everyone to work in just because you've been through recovery yourself. I know that a lot of people get into this thing of, I feel like I have an obligation to give back because it was so good to me and I want to help people and I want people to experience what I've experienced. And all of those are good motivational things. And this industry still isn't for everyone. And I see that get to a lot of places with people individually and even on a more, what can turn out to be more detrimental level on people that go to open up organizations and private practices and take an ownership level in this industry, and they're doing it for some of the wrong reasons. Or just because they, and not necessarily at their motivation is totally the wrong reason, because they might have a desire to help people, but they don't have a thorough understanding of what they actually believe about recovery at a fundamental level. So that's what I really wanted to get into today, is seeing if you're somebody that's in recovery, especially early recovery, or people that have been in it for a while, and you're thinking about either opening something or joining something or working in the industry or wanting to give back in some way, on really helping you come to a clear decision on whether or not this is something that you should be involved in. That's the ultimate goal, is finding the right people for the right seats within this industry. And if it's not, then it's not. And that's okay too. And we'll move on to that later. The most fundamental baseline level of things that you need to have an understanding of to be working in and around this industry is a personal ideological view of what recovery and addiction treatment is. On a fundamental level, what you believe about recovery, what you believe about addiction, what you fundamentally base those things on. Because there's so many different ways and avenues to look at the models of addiction treatment, right? People have and especially now, you have all kinds of different belief systems about what ways work better than others, and then what ways are backed by evidence-based practices, and what ways are backed by spiritual experiences, and what ways are backed by science, and what ways are backed by medicine, and what ways are backed by all these different things. There's a process for recovery that whatever it is for you that you believe works, you need to know and establish exactly what that is and be very clear on it. And then the most important part is standing on that. 10 toes down, standing on what you believe about recovery. Now, that's not saying, let's be clear, that's not saying that over time and education and these type of things that your views can't shift and alter in these things, but fundamentally, what you fundamentally believe about how people get clean and sober needs to be very clear from the beginning. You need, without a shadow of a doubt, know what that is for you and be able to articulate it to somebody else. You could write it down, you could articulate it, you could say it in your sleep, you have lived it, you can back it with your personal experiences, you can back it with the experiences of others, but there just has to be that at a fundamental foundational level. And what I see is people, especially people that build organizations, they take a piece from here and a piece from there, and then or they start going one way and then they completely shift their business model to something else and it doesn't make any logical sense, or they throw something in the mix that has nothing to do with the way that they've been doing treatment, and it makes it confusing and it makes people don't know what you stand for, right? And if they know what you stand for, then it's great. Like either they can agree with that or they cannot. And the good part about society right now is that like there's a lot of different methods for getting addiction treatment, for getting sober, for connecting to community, for all these different places. So it's like if something isn't for you, there's probably options out there that are going to fit whatever you're looking for. But for people that are establishing things in the industry, there has to be that. People have to know and be clear, and that's how they trust you, right? Whether they agree with it or not, that's how they trust you, is like, here's what we stand for. Here's our core value system. Here's how we do treatment, and we don't waver. We don't make exceptions because somebody doesn't like one of the rules. We don't change our policies and procedures to fit somebody's personal viewpoint on recovery. We don't do any of those things. It's here's what we are, here's what our guidelines are, and we're very clear and established in what that is. And in what I've built here, it's like I can say that our method of doing treatment applies to probably 80% of the people. And that means also that there's then 20% of the people that it doesn't apply to. And that's okay as well, right? Because we can help them get to the areas that they can get the services and the methods of treatment that they are looking for. But in my creation of what we do and the vision of that was to apply to as many people as possible, but still have a very clear process on what I believe about addiction treatment and recovery and how that works for the long term, for the best outcomes and the best benefits for the greatest amount of people over the longest period of time. Like that's it. Like that's the ultimate outcomes that I'm shooting for. Now, that ideology on what I believe about treatment has to be founded in the basis of what my personal recovery has to be very strong in that. So I have to be a living example of it, but I have to continue to be growing in my personal recovery, which means I have to be coming at this from a place of humility, which means like I'm always growing. I don't understand everything. I'm continuing to learn and adapt and transform and be challenged and be convicted, and then continue to shift some of the ways and methods in which I'm doing my recovery and then passing that on to others based on my recovery journey. And so I have to be a living, breathing example of what I'm having other people do. And if I'm not that and there's any contradictions in that, then it's not going to work. Right? I have to have a solid foundational basis of that. So to get that, though, requires time, number one, hard work. Now, this is a spot, I think, in recovery that we start getting this is like we've gotten to this place of babying people in a point of recovery where it's like, you were out, in addiction, active addiction. I was out in active addiction. We were all out in active for years, decades, whatever the case may be, just running amok, causing damage and chaos and everything. We think that within 6 months or a year of getting into recovery that we needed this soft pillow fairy tale landing to be able to like coddle us into sobriety. No, that's not the way it works. It requires hard work, which means work, actual work. The reason that people don't go through all the 12 steps continually is that it requires consistent hard work. Whether or not you agree with 12-step or not, I would say that a lot of people that don't agree with it are people that just don't want to do the work, and then they find other reasons not to do 12-step because they just don't want to work. And so like you think how hard it's going to be, and then you multiply that by 10, and that's how much work it's going to be. So to work in this industry, you need to have put in the hard work. It doesn't have to be 12-step. It can be therapy work. It can be group sessions. It can be a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways to put in work in your recovery, but it has to be work. It can't just be abstinence. It can't just be like, oh, I just put down the bottle or the needle and I just stopped. And then that's the hard work that I put in. Like that's not hard work, right? That's not the thing. The other aspect of putting in all that work is that you develop through your own personal journey, you develop a sense of self-awareness. You develop your own identity. You have to be very clear on who you are, what you believe. You have to be aware of your faults. You have to be aware of your red button points. You have to be aware of where people can trigger you. You have to be aware of what you like and don't like. You have to be aware of how you communicate. You have to be aware of your attachment styles. You have to be aware. You have to be very self-aware. You have to be aware of all the things that can and possibly will affect you moving forward and where all of your blind spots may be. And that requires a lot of work in recovery and working with other people in recovery and getting the feedback on those things for you on an individual level. Through that, you start to develop a thick skin when it comes to this because you have an awareness of who you are. Once you know who you are and what your identity is and have an awareness of that, then you are able to take that and start creating an ideology of what you are bringing to the treatment world and the industry because you're very clear on who you are. If there's any wavering on who you are, the other people, the clients that you're working with, or the individuals or whoever that you're working with in recovery will sniff that out in a heartbeat, and they will not respect you. You will not gain their trust. They will think that you're like a leaf in the wind, and you will fail at this miserably. So that piece has to be there. The other piece that along those lines that has to be there is being able to be empathetic and compassionate while also not being an empath. Like, let's be clear on that. You can be empathetic without being an empath. And I say that if you're an empath, where you really are taking on the emotions of others, you will burn yourself into the ground very quickly in this industry. You do not have, I can tell you from all the experience I've had in this industry, you cannot take on other people's thoughts and feelings and emotions and distresses on a consistent basis and not burn yourself out and not run yourself into the ground. You have to be able to separate that. Along those lines, has to be the ability to deal with people's failures and your personal failures and realizing that you can fail at things over time, and that's the best way that you're going to learn is to fail at things over time, and other people that you work with will fail at things over time, and you have to be able to learn to view that in part of the process of things and making yourself better and helping other people make themselves better. Along those lines also is the aspect of you need to be okay and get very okay with whatever your views are on death, on life and death. Let's just put life and death in there in the same category as that, but you have to be okay with that. So you have to know what you believe about death, what you may believe about afterlife and heaven and eternity and higher power and God. You need to be very clear on what your beliefs are on that. Because once you're in this industry, if you've been in this industry for long enough, that is going to be a significant piece of it. And that's what we're trying to eliminate or at least minimize to a point. But it's going to be part of it. It's going to be part of that journey. So knowing how you go through the process of grief and handling death and loss and all of those things and processing and being able to process that are an important factor in this because it's going to happen. And if it happens and you don't know how to handle it, it's going to be very detrimental at the time. So those are some of the main things of this. The biggest piece of this overall, I would say, other than developing your outside of developing your ideology, is that working in this industry and doing what we do, it has to be a calling. It has to be a God-given calling for what you're doing. And so that can look a lot of different ways. And that's what I think people get misconstrued on is like, you don't have to be a professional in this industry to have an impact in this industry, right? You can be a professional in it. You can be a counselor or a therapist or a recovery coach or a case manager or, run groups or do drug courts and all of those things. Or, you can be a sponsor. You could be a mentor. You could be just an advocate in recovery. You can be uh, in the business side of it. You can be the promotional person. You can do marketing. You can go into the medical side. You can do nursing and PA assisting and all of these. There's a lot of different ways to be able to give back other than working direct client contact or making your own agency or something along those lines. But whatever it is, it has to be a calling. And I think figuring out a calling in life is one of those major pieces. And I think people kind of default to working in the industry as their calling because they haven't really sat down and taken the time to hear what God has as plans for their life. Whatever God has planned for your life, you were chosen for, whether that's in this industry or not. It could be something completely different, something completely that has nothing to do with this at all. It could be that you are supposed to be a dog groomer or a dentist or start a landscaping company or be a painter or a musician or any of these other. There's so many other things that you can have as a calling once you get rid of the drugs and alcohol portion of life, right? There's this freedom that we get to where we get an opportunity to then sit with God and find out what we are still here for. Because God has chosen you for something. He chose you for whatever your calling is before the drugs, before the alcohol, before the the whole wreckage of life, before the abuse as a child, before the lost jobs, before the broken relationships, before all of these horrible things that we went through in life. God chose you for whatever the calling is. There's a calling on your life, and God chose that. And it's our obligation and duty to come into alignment with that once we clear out all of these demonic things of the drugs and the alcohol and the lifestyle and all these. We clear all that stuff out and we get the opportunity. We get the opportunity to sit with him and find out what that is. And he'll make it very clear for us if we ask. Now, I say that, and I don't say that out of just trying to preach to you guys. I say that from my personal recovery journey, right? I got sober in California in 2012. And, I had a group of men take me in that period of time, and they grilled all of the things about recovery into me, and they really grilled 12-step into me. And I got involved in Celebrate Recovery, and I did a 15-month-long step study of being around a group of guys and sharing our emotions and crying together, which I never crying with a group of men in a circle. Are you kidding me? But going through the process of that and learning how to open up and be in a relationship and communicate and share my feelings and open up and all of these aspects, I had to go through all of that process of it. And I had to learn, and I had to go through being sponsored, and I had to have a therapist, and I had to have counselors, and I had to see how they did things. And I had to, start to develop like what I didn't have any knowledge of recovery when I got into it. I hadn't gone to treatment before. I've gone to treatment one time. And I wasn't a repeat offender when it came through that. But when I went there, I didn't know anything about treatment. So I went through detox and residential and IOP and got involved in 12-step work. And I didn't know anything about any of that. I'd gone to a couple court mandated things before, but never on that level of actually pursuing treatment. So all of that became like gospel to me at the time. Like I didn't know any better. I took in all of those things. And then, after that, into my second year recovery, I got an opportunity to work at a treatment center. And I was basically a glorified babysitter, shuttling guys around to meetings and giving them their medications and helping them get to dinner and these things. But I got an opportunity to start sitting and having conversations and learning how to communicate and starting to give something back after I had 2 years of sobriety, starting to really influence guys a little bit. And then I had to go through the process of, I was at a place where I was, if it was up to me, let's be real here. If it was up to me, I'd still be at that spot out in California, and I'd be surfing every day, and I'd be running fitness boot camps on the beach. I got certified as a personal trainer, and I would love to just be surfing every day, running fitness groups and hanging out on the beach. Like that would be my ultimate goal in life, but that's not what the calling was. You see, because before I left California, there was a group of guys that came through that treatment center and they all went back to the East Coast and this bad batch of heroin came through. This was before fentanyl. Heroin was still a thing then, which it seems like heroin went away since then, but maybe not. But a bad batch of heroin came through, and just about all of those guys, I believe all of those guys, a whole group of 7, 8 guys overdosed. It hit me in a place where I thought, you know what? What are we even doing here? I put so much work into this, so much work into these guys, spent all this time, all these meetings, all this stuff, only for people to go out and die. I'm good. I'm good in my sobriety. I'm out of here. And so I went back to Colorado with a girl I was dating at the time. And when I got to Colorado, I did not do jack shit for my recovery. I didn't go to meetings. I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't go to groups. I didn't get a therapist. I didn't do any of that stuff. I got away from all of it for a period of time. And then my life started to, without using drugs again, I didn't pick up anything, but it started to spiral, right? It wasn't, things were not on track. So I ended up getting involved with the church. And I ended up with that, I got invited to help start a recovery ministry. Now I was working as a personal trainer and all these things, and I had a kind of busy lifestyle going on that I thought was a busy lifestyle. And I wasn't really sure that I wanted to do it, but my answer to her when she called and asked if I wanted to be part of it was just to say yes. So I helped start this recovery ministry, and there was 9 of us. Eventually that led down to me being the only one left, but there were still 9 of us that were in the leadership team that helped start it. And through that process, I ended up needing to go get certified. I didn't need to go get certified, but I was like, if I'm going to be a leader of a recovery ministry, I knew at the time, like, I needed to hold a higher standard. And so I went to go get certified as an addiction counselor. And through that process, I ended up getting a job to work in the industry, helped start a residential program, did some residential work with men's and women's programs, IOP stuff, sober livings, outpatient, like all kinds of different aspects of the industry, and learned how to build that stuff from the ground up. And through that process, I started to really see, based on my experience doing ministry work, doing sponsor work, being sponsored, going to a therapist, seeing the inner workings of a treatment program and what worked and what didn't work, I started to develop my own ideology of what I believed was the best way to do treatment. And the more that I started to voice those, the more I got pushback on it. And so, there was always like a calling for me to do something to make things better when I saw them being difficult. And over that time, I watched a lot of people burn out in the industry, a lot. I mean, I saw people that went through 8 years of school to become a therapist come out and do an internship, get involved in working for a treatment center, and burn out in their first 6 months. And now they're $100,000, $200,000 in debt, and they're burned out on their career path. And now they're off to go be a painter somewhere because they didn't take the time to sit and figure out if it was what they were called to do. And I say that it's a calling because in my process of this, and I say that if it was up to me, I would be out on the beach. The only doors that kept opening for me were leading in the recovery direction. My personal training programs and groups didn't work out. The living in California didn't work out. All of these pieces of the puzzle kept falling into place only when I kept pushing into what God was guiding me to do. Right? That was the only doors that kept opening. When I started the foundation that I started, I didn't have any experience running a nonprofit. There was a whole other time, I can get into this another day, but there was a whole other piece of this where I hadn't run a nonprofit before. I had no experience in a nonprofit. I only had my personal experience in recovery. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any funding for it. I didn't have any grant writing experience. And I wrote a grant and I was granted a couple $100,000 to kickstart this thing off without any experience. And so that was one of those things where it was like, I made this deal with God. I was like, okay, God, I'm going to test you. If you show up for me like this, I will follow what you're saying. And if you want it to work, then it's going to work. If you don't want it to work, then I'm going to do things my way. And I had that bargaining thing with God. And so God came through and he's like, okay, now go. Now go do it. And so for me, I've never felt burnt out on this. That's been the one thing, no matter how stressful it's gotten stressful, and it continues to be stressful. I've never got burnt out on it. I've seen other people burn out. I don't understand their burnout. I've been able to deal with the loss and the shifts and the ups and the downs and the all these different factors of it, and it still hasn't affected me in a negative way. I've still been able to push through, and the vision of it is bigger, and my belief system grows, and it's all, I understand it's all part of this process, but it's because I'm living in something that I'm actually called to do, even though ultimately it's like, if it were up to me, like, I would be lazy. I have a natural lazy streak in me, and I would be hanging out every day, and that would be fun for me. But like, the fulfillment that I get from this is uncomparable to that. The successes that I get to see with not just clients, but with my team and their progress and their growth, and like, because they're all in recovery too, so getting to witness that and be a part of their journey is amazing to me. But it's because I'm living in that of what I've been called to do, and I've had to stay disciplined to what I believe about recovery, to make my recovery better, to make the organization better. I've had to adapt over time. But there's fundamental things that I believe about recovery that make this successful. So with that, what I've seen is that when I try to, I sometimes I try to pass this on, and people will ask me for advice if they're starting something new or all of these things, and I can give everybody the blueprint all day long. But there's like this lack of humility, and there's this pride and ego sometimes that comes in, where people are like, I don't want to hear it. I'm going to do it my way. And then they don't have a good fundamental basis, or it's just not their calling. They just haven't taken the time to sit down and hear what God has for their life. And I don't think enough people in our instant gratification society today even just take that time. Whether you're in recovery or not, just taking the quiet time to listen to what God has to say. And a lot of times for me, it's like, I need to get out of cell phone range up in the mountains and leave the phone in the car and be out completely silent and disconnected to be able to hear those things. And I don't know what that looks like for you, but I know that there is a process for this. And the ones that ultimately benefit are the people that need the help. The ones that here, let's clarify that. The ones that ultimately benefit or suffer are the ones that need the help. So granted, we do need a large amount of people working in this industry. And granted, we're at a overwhelming place where we do need more people to be taking this on. And we do need all different kinds of treatment that are able to communicate and work together and not stay isolated in their own little bubbles, and kind of work with each other, even though they might have different ideological views about recovery. But we still need to be able to do that. And there needs to be people that are available to offer those services, but it has to be coming from the right place. It has to be coming from the right place for it to be successful. So that is all I got for you guys for this evening. Hopefully you got something out of it. Feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, leave me your thoughts and feelings. And with that said, hopefully we'll be getting a guest on here pretty soon, and we will be able to really kick this thing into high gear, where it's not just me ranting at you for the whole, what do we got, 30 minutes on this one. And we'll see kind of where it goes from there. But love you guys. Thank you for listening and staying tuned. I will see you again next time. Good night.